Do you believe in ghosts? The dead coming back to haunt the living?
Garrett, where are you? You were the one I thought I could trust.
I don't know what you expect to find in there, but be careful. Don't become a ghost yourself.
I've been a ghost all my life.
Jason, you know me.
Yes.
I like to think.
Yes.
I like a good sneaking game.
Okay.
I like hiding in the shadows. I like ganking people from behind.
Yeah.
There's maybe a better way to say that. I like
Jeff
all
likes
four.
getting ganked from behind.
No, that's not what I was saying. That's not what I'm saying at all. So it's with a single manly tear running down my face. I gotta tell you, I didn't really like this new Thief game, man. Welcome everybody to Rage Select. We're reviewing Thief today. That is I don't know how you say it when they had the original thing. It was like THI4F.
Oh, really?
The fourth. Which is coming out, or which came out last week or the week before or whatever, on pretty much every console under the sun.
Yep.
The PC on down, the next gen stuff, and it's this game is just kind of meh. Like, I don't.
That seems to be the sentiment about it.
I don't understand. I mean, there's been some people out there who seem to really like this game, and I had a very hard time while I was playing it trying to see what exactly it was that they like about this. Now, there's some of that just comes from a conceptual level. We'll talk about that later. But before we do anything else, let's talk about the fucked up story.
Okay.
It's like two stories mishmashed on top of each other that don't really work very... I need to focus on one or the other.
Okay.
So Garrett is a master thief, right?
Yes.
And in the beginning of the game, he goes and he's on this job, and there's these cultists, and he's with this lady, and she's a little more brash. And you saw it in the dojo episode. It's the very first thing in the game, so this is maybe slightly... No, I'm not going to say it's a spoiler. They run across... I'll talk around it. They run across some new supernatural junk. Ba-boom, there's a big thing. And now it's like a year later, and Garrett has been out of circulation. He's come back to the city, which is kind of this weird Victorian England, but it's
very
steampunky.
dirty.
Everything's dirty. Everything's gray. Everybody's complaining about the industry and the rich and all that kind of stuff. So from there, there's this storyline that involves Garrett doing these jobs to kind of try to figure out what happened in the year that he was gone. He's also got some brand new fancy extra special superpowers that he can use to do various things in the form of focus that we'll talk about later. But then there's also the second plot. It's one of those things where it seemed like they couldn't quite decide whether they wanted to do class warfare a la BioShock Infinite, or whether they wanted to do supernatural, maybe a little bit more like Dishonored. Like, there's all this like weird stuff, and the problem that I kind of had with all of this is that there wasn't, and I know that people are not going to agree with me about this, but I could never find a good hook into the story of Thief.
Okay.
Like, Garrett himself is, in this game, the way that he's written is a very kind of bland character.
Sure.
Like, I got to tell you, you remember when we were looking at the game how he's got the ninja mask that he pulls down, and he's got the hood up or whatever?
Yeah.
You never see him with
Without
his hood off or with anything. The character actor for him, I don't know if they were just asking him to be very like dull and monotone, but he's got that he's written as a character who's very much like, I am a thief. I steal things. That's what I do. That's
right.
who I am. And you're like, well, part of being a thief is to get stuff, right?
Yeah.
To the end of, I don't know, retiring or what. Like, this guy seems like he's a kleptomaniac more than like a thief. He's just compulsive. He needs to pick shit up. Like, he's like, I don't feel good unless I've got the golden forks that these people all keep in their houses in my backpack or whatever. So after the intro sequence, they let you loose into the city, and there are 7 to 8 acts in the game where you go out and you have this open world city that's divided into like 4 or 5 different districts that you can kind of just roam across. Now, in the beginning, and actually really never, throughout the game, there are dudes what are down on the streets, and if they see you, they will come after you and try to attack you.
Yes.
So you're pretty much just running along rooftops and doing this sort of thing, which would be fine except for the fact that, this game doesn't really seem to know whether it wants to be like very realistic or fanciful.
Okay.
Because the simple act of running and jumping and doing stuff isn't really that fulfilling.
Right.
Like, and while I was playing it, I was trying to put my hand on what it was. Like, what is it that's feeling wrong to me here? And this may not be a valid comparison, but we've seen games that have taken this, you're a master ninja running along the rooftops type of stuff to a much better conclusion than what we have in Thief. Things like Assassin's Creed, or things like Just Cause, or things like even in Dishonored, which is there's a lot of parallels between this game and Dishonored, where in Dishonored they gave you the blink mechanic, right? So you can just like warp Nightcrawler style to the tops and stuff.
Yeah, possess rats and all that stuff.
Exactly. Whereas here you can run, you can jump. There are places where you can put rope arrows that you can jump onto. That's pretty much it. Like there's anchor points in the certain walls where you can climb up, and there's secret passageways throughout the city that you can go through. But I found myself, one of the biggest problems that I had with this game was I found myself constantly stuck. And a lot of that is maybe due to the fact that they give you... I don't like engaging in hyperbole, Jason. I don't like it. But one of the crappiest maps that I've ever seen in a video game in my life.
What?
It's this top-down map that represents the entire map in boxes, right? That are all stuck together. But it doesn't give you a very good sense of, like, how should I explain this? So there will be two areas in the game, right? That where the maps for, like, Stone Market and the South City are like connected. Like you'll see on your map, there's a thoroughfare. There's like a road that goes up and then it goes over to this way. And through that road, you should be able to get to the next place. But when you get to the end of that road, there's a door and it's closed and it's locked and you can't go through it. So then you're like, okay. So then what you have to do is, instead of doing that, you have to find... There's all these windows in the game that go into like people's houses, right? You shove a crowbar into the window and you lift it up, and then you go into their house. And the lifting is actually, I don't know if it's masking a loading screen or what, but a lot of times when you go through those windows, it'll actually load into another area. It takes a minute to load. But sometimes the only way to get to another area is you have to go into one of these houses and then go through that house, out the window, out the other side window, into the next district. The problem is that, like, just as a normal gameplay thing, I try to avoid a loading screen if at all possible, because 99% of the time that you open that window, you're just going into a house where there's a bunch of shit for you to rob.
Right.
But sometimes that's the only way to get from point A to point B. And there's a verticality to the game where it's not entirely clear whether you're supposed to get from this district to this district by going through a window or going through a door at street level. And I feel like the game could have benefited a lot more from having because you can open up your map, you can set an objective on your map of where you're going to go. Like, I'm going to go rob this house, it's over here.
Yes.
And I'll put a dot in the middle of your display where you can see it no matter where you are in the world. They'll tell you this is the place you're going to, and it's 55 meters away. I feel like this entire thing could have been fixed if they had just had a system, and maybe I missed it, but I'm pretty sure I didn't, where you can see a breadcrumb trail that'll tell you,
oh, sure,
go up this building and then go into this door and then whatever.
Like
Dead Space.
Dead Space, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or just some representation of, like, maybe just put icons of, like, here's the next point you need to get to, and then here's the next point you need to get to. Because I found that a lot of when I was playing this game, I was trying to remember, how do I get from this district to this district? Because you go to the one district and you do all this stuff, and you go back to this district and you do all this stuff. Because in between the various missions that you have that forward the plot, there are all these little sub-missions that you can get from Basso, who's like your thief handler guy. And he'll give you, go steal all of this lady's ashtrays, or go steal the golden crown of snakes out of this person's apartment or whatever. You're like, all right, I'm going to pick all these up to get some more money to do that. But now you've got to get to that place. And it wasn't helped by the fact that the entire game takes place at night. So everything is dark, everything is gray with a blue filter over it.
Yeah.
Everything looks identical. Like, I actually went and loaded up the original Thief game.
Yeah.
And, like, different colored buildings, different colored alleys, different colors being used to represent places. Or you think about Dishonored, where you've got, like, very much landmarks that'll tell you. And there are sort of landmarks like that in this game, but they're so fucking subtle that I'm like,
everything looks like mud.
Right. And so it just became, a lot of it became an exercise in frustration, just simply walking around the video game. And to be honest, that's not what you want out of a game that's about a master thief, right?
Right.
It's you want to feel like you're a ninja, you're
Pulling
running
off heists.
Right. Or like you do in Assassin's Creed when you're like running along rooftops and you're going from place to place and stuff like that. You want to feel like that. And part of it was also the fact that this game all takes place in a first-person point of view. And so you don't get to see Garrett do these flips and swoops and climbing a rope and stuff like that. It's all from a first-person perspective, which I understand is how they did it in the original Thief. It just seems like it may have worked a little bit better if you could have been impressed by seeing this person's handiwork, by seeing them. Not to mention the fact that in a stealth game, it always tends to work better, at least in my opinion, when you have a third-person perspective, because you can see around corners.
Right.
You can gauge where you are in relationship to the line of sight from the guards, which would be a problem if it wasn't so easy.
Like in Monaco or something like that.
Exactly.
That might be an exaggerated example, but...
Exactly. But, that would have been... That part with the guards would have been a problem, except for the fact that your character is so, at least on normal difficulty level... you're so punished for getting into any kind of combat that I spent the entire time just running and running and running. If I got seen, just run away. Or I was on the PC, reload. Yeah, quick save and then reload. And that's also kind of a bummer, right? Is that if you do get seen in a game, it would be one thing if you got seen and it was an instant failure, but the guards in the game are very tenuous, and they'll follow you for a long period of time. Tenacious. And if you don't have a super good hold on the way the city is laid out, you can end up running, and you're following the map, you're trying to find, okay, this alley looks like there's got a place I can run up a wall, right? Nope. It's just a blind, dead alley, and then here come 4 guards, and they just beat you to death, and then you reload, and then you're done. So combat, straight up combat, and I understand that in a Thief game, it would have been silly in this game if the combat had been like Assassin's Creed, where you're just kicking so much ass, right? But the combat was so it was so unsatisfying and I went so out of my way to avoid it that it just
you were like a kid in a slap fight on the playground.
Yeah, it just became the sort of thing where I was like, I'm going to avoid this at all costs.
Yeah.
Like, why even have this mechanic in the game, because it's just not satisfying at all. Like, you can do some upgrades to make your combat better, but for the most part, the game wants you to sneak. And I wish that instead of dicking around with combat, because the combat is a very simple thing. You've got one dodge move, and then you've got one melee hit move.
Yeah.
You got a blackjack. You don't have a sword or a knife or any of that stuff.
It is exceptionally bland.
It is very simple. It is very bland. And if you have more than one enemy, it becomes very difficult to deal with, because
as it should.
Sure, but once again, you get to a point where, okay. Here's another thing about the first person, is that if you do get in a fight with somebody in a first-person game, right, they're in the middle of your screen coming at you.
Yeah.
Their friend with the crossbow is behind them shooting you, but you can't gauge where they are because the person is right up in your face. It's hard to control what's going on there. And I would think I would have liked it more if they would have given you some more options for getting away from fights, or at least like stunning a guy or something.
Yeah, throwing down smoke pellets and grappling out of there.
You can, and that goes into another thing, is where you can actually buy flash bombs, but the thing is that all the arrows and all of the tools that you have to spend the thief money on, which goes back to something I was talking with you about, is that when you're playing a game called Thief and you're stealing stuff, right? Mm-hmm. You need a reason to steal stuff. And the reason that you have in this game to steal stuff is to restock your arrows, to buy upgrades, which, there's a whole bunch of upgrades that are all about, well, this makes you a better melee fighter. But as I just got done saying, like, why the fuck would I want to be a better melee fighter?
Right. This makes you really good at this shitty part of the game.
Right. And for the most part, they give you a little bit of a way to customize the way that your character operates. But the thing is that outside of one sequence in the game, like the guards that you see at the beginning are the same as the guards that you see at the end.
Yeah.
You got sword guy, you got commander guy, you got crossbow guy. And there was never, like, if you could sneak past crossbow guy in level 1, you could sneak past crossbow guy in level 7. Like, there's the tools they give you for sneaking don't really need to be upgraded all that much. There are plenty of ways that you can get around that, and part of this comes from, I feel like in this game that they had this thing where they wanted to keep design elements from the original Thief to satisfy longtime fans,
right?
But then they also wanted to do their own thing with it, and that it got just muddy in there. That it just ended up being kind of a mess in between. Like, you have all these upgrades that you can do where you can carry more arrows, you can carry more life or take less damage or things like that. But then you have a second set of powers that are built into focus.
Yes.
Where you got, instead of I believe that original Garrett had a mechanical eye. I think that was part of the storyline, a clockwork, like steampunk.
That seems right.
Eye. Here, he's got an eye full of magic, essentially. Like, it was like a wizard just bam, right in his eye. You know? And
how did you get that ability, Garrett? Wizard shot a load in my eye.
I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it.
I needed the money.
So early on in the game, you get these magical powers, and basically what it is you hit a button and you go into focus mode. There's a meter that goes down, and in higher difficulty levels, they take the focus mode away. In higher difficulty level, you can actually set this game up to play like hardcore OG original Thief, where you don't have any powers. You've got a limited selection of arrows that you can use and stuff like that. But I played it on normal with all that stuff turned on. And this focus does one thing, one incredibly useful thing, which is that when you turn it on, it briefly highlights all of the loot that you can pick up in a room and makes it glow blue, which was pretty much what I used it for. Like, you have upgrades that you can use later on where you say, this upgrade lets you slow down time to shoot arrows better. But then when you do that, it takes a big chunk of that focus meter off, and you have to find poppies to regenerate it. So I was just like,
got to get high.
Yeah, exactly. So I was just like, no, I don't think I want to. So those powers, you end up going to this old lady, and you can buy focus points, and they get increasingly more expensive as you buy more and more of them to upgrade these things. And some of the upgrades were okay, but like, this is like the equivalent of detective vision or eagle vision or something like that.
Right.
What would have been incredibly useful for this is if I could have seen dudes through walls. Like, there's one upgrade that you get where you can see their footsteps. You can see, like, these little ripples of sound.
If you're going to put upgrades in there, put some upgrades in there.
That was kind of the thing that I got about... one of the things I didn't like about this game is that the upgrade progression was so tepid that I never felt like I really needed any of them.
Yeah.
Like, by the end of the game, I just stopped spending money altogether unless it was just buying more arrows, because I was just like, I don't need any of this stuff. Which is a real shame, because... the whole reason that you're stealing things is to get enough money to buy these upgrades or these focus powers, and without there being a really good reason to invest in that, and maybe a lot of this comes down to my own predilection towards power fantasy in video games. I want to see upgrades make you more powerful in a way that is recognizable. Here, they were very subtle upgrades, and I just don't really dig that all that much, especially when you consider the amount of work that they make you put in for getting the money to do these upgrades, robbing all these houses. Like, there's one thing in this game, there's one single thing in this game that I could fix. It would be this. If I walk up to a table and there are 4 things on that table, let me hold down the steal shit button and then have him go and get all of the stuff. Because I can't count how many desks there are in this game with 6 drawers on them.
You got to open each one.
And almost every one of them doesn't have anything in it.
They should have made it like Surgeon Simulator.
Oh,
you're going to steal stuff that way.
That would have been a hilarious game. You're trying to pickpocket somebody. So I mean, I'm sure that some people are going to enjoy this game, but for me, it was a drudge. It was a kind of a bore. Like, the main character wasn't super interesting. The main story arc wasn't super interesting. The act of stealing stuff, that's the other thing, is that when you steal all the garbage that's just laying around in the game, it gives you a very small amount of money for each thing that you pick up. You have to steal a lot for that money to add up to one of the bigger upgrades in the game.
Yeah.
Now, before we get to the end, I would like to say there are some things in this game that I really like.
Such as?
Okay. There is one mission that is totally out of place. It's mission number 5. People who played the game know what I'm talking about. That takes the game in a very different direction.
Okay.
For this one single mission, it actually introduces a bunch of stuff where you're just like, what? Why? I don't understand. But it's interesting, and it changes the tone of the game for that one particular mission in a way that I really appreciated. It is immensely satisfying the first few times that you do it when you're able to like lure a guard out of the way and then hit him, and then especially when you shoot people in the head with an arrow in this game, the arrow sticks in their head and falls down to the ground. That's real cool. In the beginning, before the repetition of the game had worn out its welcome, exploring this world was interesting until it became clear that it was very much all the same. The actual story missions were a lot of times good, and they would have set pieces in them. There's one, this is not really a spoiler, there's one where you're escaping a building that's kind of like falling down, right? That stuff's always really cool because it gives you the ability to use all of that acrobatics and stuff to get out of this situation. There's one where you're infiltrating a brothel, and it's got all the, there's a bunch of crazy shit going down in that brothel.
Yeah.
There's kind of this weird lore subtext of some of the characters are interesting. Like there was one that was the thief hunter general or something.
Okay.
He was he's kind of like, I'm the bad guy. But there was some other stuff going on with the story about like that girl in the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
Who is she and her relationship to Garrett, and like this guy who's a freedom fighter and his people. And like I said, there was a half a subtext of that whole, it's the revolution down with the man, like Bane in Dark Knight Rises or whatever, which is interesting, but it didn't really go anywhere. So there were some parts of this game that I really liked. When the game, I had real problems on my PC with frame rate, and I can't tell whether that's my PC or the game itself. Like whenever there was too much going on in a certain area, the frame rate would just drop to zilcho. Also, I have to tell you, it's been a long time since I've seen this, but I tried to play this game with a mouse and a keyboard. This is not a good game to play with a mouse and a keyboard.
Okay. Really?
It just doesn't like. It feels like a console port. Like, here, let me give you an example. The E button on your keyboard is used for three things. You hit the E button every time you want to pick up a piece of loot.
Right.
You hold down the E button when you want to pick up a body and throw it. You also hit the E button if you're near the edge of something to go into cover mode.
Oh, that sounds like a recipe for trouble.
Can you see where this is going?
Yeah.
Where that guard is coming and I'm trying to pick up his friend, and my motherfucking Garrett just keeps like, I want to go into cover. I want to go into cover.
Yeah.
Like just over and over again. I'm like, no, dude. Like the prompt even says it's over the guy's body. There's an E button on his body that says hold E, and I hold down E
And go into cover.
There was some weird stuff too, like where like a guard would recognize me and he'd get up in my face on my bow out, and I shot an arrow at him and just went right through him.
Seems like this could have used a little bit more time in the oven.
There's a lot of weird polished things. Like I was telling you this before. This is one. Oh my god, this drove me off the fucking wall. Where there are NPCs out on the street and they're having NPC conversations about like, did you see Madame Marmalade? She just bought herself a new eagle brooch. It was worth so much money, and she keeps it in her house, she told me. Oh, that's delightful. I look forward to seeing it. And they're saying this so that you can go find her and steal her brooch, right? The thing is that if you don't go do that, they keep repeating the conversation over and over forever. There was one point where I was trying to get into this building and I couldn't figure out how they wanted me to go into this building to get this loot, and I kept triggering these two guys having a conversation about a prostitute. Like sometimes they were having this conversation and I would move a little bit away from them and I could still hear them, and I'd move a little bit back forward to them and it would trigger the restart of the conversation.
It's like a Truman Show thing. They're like,
he kept saying,
will you just let us finish our line, Mr. Thief, sir?
I know what he says. I heard it so many times. He says, something's different about you. Oh, you don't smell like sweat and piss. And he's like, yeah, I just went and saw this prostitute. I've been on her waiting list for 3 months. He's like, I've been on there for 5 months. And the other guy's like, oh, she's totally worth it. And they're telling you she's got all these perfumes that you can go steal from her. But I've heard that conversation so many times, it's bored into my brain.
Yeah, at one point you're going to walk by and they're just going to look at you and go, whore, perfumes, she's over there, you know the rest.
Yeah. So in addition to the main story game, when you get done with the game, they plop you back out in the world, and you can redo any of the chapters. Like you just go up to the chapter entrance and you can go back in there. But once again, it's a little weird where if you don't know exactly where the chapter entrance is, I was like, oh, there's a door. I haven't been in there before. It was like, do you want to replay chapter 2? And I'm like, oh, no, that's fine. I'm all right. There are two other characters in the game, Ector and I can't remember the other guy's name, this like circus dude, who have a series of, I think there's 3 submissions for each one of them where you actually load into a different area and you have to do these submissions. There's also this rating system that you have for every mission that you go on about whether you like, do you not mess with anybody or do you kill a bunch of people, and you get bonuses for doing that. Sometimes those bonuses on the mission will conflict with each other. There'll be one that involves you getting seen, and there'll be another bonus that's like, don't get seen,
right.
which for a person like me just drives my head into a burning fire. Overall, it's not an incompetent game, but it's just very unpolished. And the core conceit of it just didn't really ever hook me.
What do you give it?
I got one other thing. One other thing. There's also, this is just for people who are thinking about buying the game, there's also a challenge mode that you have where they take the mechanics of the game. Like there's one called like Loot Rush or something, where you're in an area and you get a score, and the faster that you pick up loot in an order, the higher your score goes. So you'll pick up a loot and there'll be a countdown timer for when your score multiplier is going to go down. So you want to keep picking stuff up. They do a few things like that where you can change the variables in the game to make it to give you kind of a fresh take on that. And then there's leaderboards online that you can submit your score to try to get a good score. You can also, like I said, you can play the game with a bunch of custom difficulty options. Like there is a mini map that for some reason the game, you turn the mini map on, you load into a new area, minimap's turned off. We got to turn the minimap back on.
Weird.
I don't know about that one. But there's you can set the game up so you can't have a minimap. You can set it up so the guards are much more sensitive. You can set it up so that you don't have any of the arrows that can kill people. You only have like the trick arrows.
Right.
Where the game encourages you to get a higher score by being sneakier. It's just a little dull and bland. I don't know.
Come on.
From my enjoyment of the game, I kind of would give it a 2.5.
Okay.
But I think I'm going to give it a 3 just because it's an average video game.
Okay.
Like, I played it once. I don't think I'll ever have a desire to play it again.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend it to anybody who's not big into Thief, or like I would say watch our Dojo episode and see what the gameplay is like, and if that appeals to you, go for it. But like the game itself was so gray, and that's literally how I felt about it. I was just like,
okay.
all right.
Do you think the franchise is dead?
No, not even a little bit.
Do you think it should be dead?
I think that this is going to be one of those where somebody needs to DMC this and take it and say, like, I know that you people who like the old Thief are going to be upset. Or maybe it needs to go in one of two directions, right? It needs to go Dishonored, where they're like, we don't care about pissing off the fans of the original game.
Right.
We're going to do whatever. We're just going to make a fun game. Or it needs to go like DayZ, where it's like, this is a hardcore motherfucking sneaking game for hardcore sneaky mass motherfuckers who we're not even concerned about how it looks. We just want to give you that like hard sneaking, I'm going to say hard sneaking action. And I think that either one of those would be fine. But just please, guys, don't just sit there in the middle. Lukewarm toast. Blech. Ugh.
You walk a path few would wish.
That's the only one I know.